Okay, picking up where the last video left off, and I decided to finish recording these in my office. The sound was just pretty terrible at home. So in any event, we have the containers up and running, and we're ready to kind of start looking at the Flask code and AppSmith. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is show you how to kind of shut down and restart the containers in a few different ways. So one option is to look at the Docker desktop app, and if you expand this little stack icon means kind of like a set of containers or a compose. You can just click the stop button there, and that will stop all the containers from running. It doesn't delete the containers or anything like that. It just stops them from running. This is equivalent to hitting Control C if you're running it like this. So let's say I hit Control C and I stop the containers. AppSmith always takes the longest because it's got the most stuff. Okay, so if I now look back at Docker, you can see all of them are stopped. If I'm just wanting to do database work, I could just start the DB container. I don't have to start all of them. Of course, they're all taking resources, so if running all of them at the same time causes your system to be a little sluggish, then you can run just the DB in the web. You don't have to run the AppSmith container necessarily, unless you're, of course, doing something in AppSmith. So the other thing is all of this output can be overwhelming, but you might want to run things from the command line anyway. So you can do docker compose start -d, and that will, docker compose up -d, up-d, and that will start the containers, but what's called in detach mode. So you'll get a few little messages, but not all of the output. And if you need to see the output, you can still click on one of the containers and look at the logs tag in the Docker desktop application. Of course, AppSmith takes some time to start, so we always give it its time. It restarts really quickly, but in any event, first thing we're going to do is go into the Python application and kind of take a look at how things are set up. So I'm going to go to VS Code. I'm going to go ahead and close this file, close these little password files, and explore the Flask application. Okay, so the Flask application is just a bigger, more complex version of the simple examples we had done earlier. The most kind of the cornerstone file right now is this init.py file that's in the source folder. Okay, you'll see inside there, I'm doing some things. Let me choose the right container. Now, we're not actually going to be running any code directly, I guess, through VS Code or on your host laptop right now. It'll all be run through Docker. But if you want to get rid of those little squigglies for the Flask extension MySQL, you can just pip install Flask extension MySQL. But in any event, so we're creating a DB application object, a DB object, MySQL object, and that's how we're going to connect to the database. And then this is the, I guess, sort of the powerhouse of the application. It's the putting everything together. So we create our Flask application like we did in the other examples, and then we have some setup to connect Flask to our database. So we're looking at, don't so much worry about the secret key. That's for session-related things, which we're not focusing on, at least not at this point. So then we set up our database connection with the user we're going to connect with. Right now we're going to use the root user. We're going to read the password file, and it may be if you use different passwords for root versus just the regular file, you might need to put root here, or you can just get rid of this and actually put the password that's in that file. It's terrible style, but right now, that is something you would do. I'm going to leave mine as it was because I use the same password in both files. Okay, so the database we're going to connect to is DB. Why is it DB? Well, in our docker compose.yaml, the database container is called DB, and remember the containers can talk through their private network, and so when they're talking through their private network, they use the kind of the container port. So in this case, 3306. So back to init.py, and the database we're going to connect to is Northwind. So then we initialize the DB. We have just a default route. If somebody were to go to 127.0.0.1, like localhost, or kind of without any routes, it's just going to say welcome to the 3200 boilerplate. And then these lines go about importing from customers, products, and then this views. I didn't put views in a folder, just to different ways to organize code. So each one of these folders, customers and products, you could think of representing one of your personas or one of your collections of routes for your REST API. Each one of them is in what's called a blueprint, a Flask blueprint. So you'll see at the top of each one of them, there's a different blueprint. And I'll come back to that a little bit later, but just know that a blueprint is, for now, we'll just say it's a collection of routes, kind of with a name. So what we're doing in these lines is importing those different route files, or those different blueprints, and then we're registering each blueprint with the Flask application object. We're saying to the Flask, hey, I want to register a blueprint. The blueprint I want to register is what I imported up here, so I'm importing that views. And I want to have a URL prefix, meaning that if somebody is going to type in in the search bar of the browser, not the search bar, the URL where you type in a URL, it would be, like localhost or whatever, whatever the IP address, whatever the port would be. I think for us it's 8001 for the web container. And then if I want to access any of the routes in views, first I have to put /v. And so if I look in views, there's a base route and test. So if I just leave /v, it's going to do the base route. If I do /test, it'll execute that. But if I just put /test, it's not going to know that I'm talking about the test and v. In fact, that will cause an error. So these prefixes are the things that go kind of before the route URL endpoint resource. Okay, so let's say in terms of working on our project, we decide that we are ready to add some functionality, another route to our products. So our products set of routes. So I'm going to come here, and whenever we're adding a route to a blueprint, I'm just going to compress that. We use the name of the blueprint, so at products.route, and then we give the resource that we're going to want to talk to. So let's say we're adding a new product. So this might be product. Let me do get first. Let's just say that we want to get this up here gets the 5 most expensive. Let's say we want to get the 10 most expensive. So we'll give this the 10 most expensive resource, and the methods. Remember, if you don't put anything, it assumes it's get, but I'll put it here just for completeness. Then we're going to define a function. So define get 10 most expensive products. And for now, I'm just going to leave the function empty or stubbed out. So it's going to pass. Actually, I'm going to just return success. Okay. In order to actually retrieve this information, I'm going to steal some of the code from this route. But the first thing we need to do is to create a cursor, construct our query. I mean, you can do those in any order, and then we can execute the query. So I'm going to steal this code, and then I'm going to put it here. Let me, I'm just going to move it down so it's a little more organized. Okay, so if you're not familiar with Python, if you have a multi-line string literal, you can just put it in these triple quotes, and then you can have multiple lines. So here I want to do everything the same, but I want to retrieve the 10 most expensive items. All right, so then I construct a cursor using the DB object. So where does the DB object comes from? Where does it come from? So we're importing it here, and we're importing it from source, which is from basically this source tree, but it's importing it from right here. So it's this same DB object, okay? Now, all right, so here in products.py, let's go ahead and continue working on our cursor. Okay, so I'm sorry, our query. So this is going to execute the query. Again, I'm kind of stealing some code. And the result, quote unquote, of the query is going to be inside the cursor. So the rest of this code takes the result from the cursor and packages it up into JSON. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this, and I'm just going to paste this. Let me talk through it Let me talk through it in a little more detail. Okay, so executing the query is going to store the results in cursor, the top 10 items. What this is doing is gathering or capturing from the cursor description, it's gathering all of the headers, which is basically the names of the columns. Okay. Then I create this empty JSON data. It's really just a dictionary. We're going to JSONify it later. Then I gather all of the data from the cursor. And then what I'm doing here is I'm using this zip function. So it takes one of the column headers and the rows, and it zips their values together, because the row data from the data doesn't have like the column header names. So zip takes the column header and the row values and puts them together in basically something that can look like a dictionary. And then we're appending that to this dictionary, okay? And we need to zip that data together so that JSONify, which is we'll take this dictionary data and convert it to JSON so that it can do its thing. So, and then we return that JSON directly. All right, so I'm going to save this and just giving it one more look over. So I think we're good. So I'm going to go to Docker, and I want to check to make sure that I don't have any errors in product. So anytime you change one of the Python files, you should see a reload happen here. So let's see, the last one was at 741. So I'm going to go back, and I'm just going to put a space, and then I'm going to save again. And okay, so now we have an additional one. So that's how you know that you're hot reloading the right files. And I'm saying that because I've had a few people who have had a couple different copies of the boilerplate, and the code they're editing is not the same as the code that they did the Docker Compose up with, and so it's not working so well. Okay, back at JSON. I'm sorry, back at Python. So I think we're good here. So how could I test this? Well, one way would be to use thunderclient. So I'm going to go into thunderclient, and I don't have any collections yet, so I'll make a new collection. Oh, actually I do, I'm sorry, I have these simple requests. Let's see, I'll make a new collection for products. And then into products, I'll make a new request, and we'll call this test top 10. It's a GET request. our URL is localhost:8001. Now, what is the resource that we're accessing? Well, it's, this right here. But remember, we have that URL prefix. So I'm going to copy this, and the URL prefix for products is P, and then I will paste that there. I don't think we need any other stuff, so let's just see what happens when we send. We get the top 10 products back. Okay. If we wanted to test the other routes, we could add, a test for the other routes. So let's say test top 5, and the name of that route is most expensive. Oops, I didn't actually create it. So again, localhost 8001/p/ oops, I need a slash. Most expensive. Send, and we get 5 options here. Okay, well, I'm going to stop this video here and then pick up in the next video with probably AppSmith. See you in a bit.